Khalil. I'm the director of the Muslim Studies program. I'd like to welcome you to this artist talk by MSU artist in residence, Qais Assali. And I want to thank especially the Department of Art History, and Design for all that you do. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest speaker, and thank you for making your way here. Room 310, projector wasn't working, so that's why we're here. That's why we're crammed into this room. Qais Assali is currently a visiting assistant professor and artist in residence of critical race studies in the art history, and design department of Michigan State University. He works with video installation, sculpture, lecture performance, sound, photography, and the archives seek to engage and subvert national geopolitical power dynamics. His interdisciplinary work stages questions between sight and the body in relation to his own identity and locale in order to debunk metaphoric surrounding contested geographies. Assali's work has been internationally exhibited at various institutions, and he has been a faculty member at a number of institutions as well, including at Ummah College in Jerusalem. And he holds 2 master's degrees, an MFA from Bard College in New York, and an MA in art education from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Qais Assali.
Hello everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for a great introduction. My name is Qais Assali, as Muhammad mentioned, and I'm an artist, designer, and residence this year of the critical race studies. And I'm so glad to be a part of this program in its second phase that's happening this year. For this talk, again, I want to thank the Muslim Studies for this invitation and to be here in the community of MSU. So for this event, I choose some of the words that I feel might be interesting or might be related to think of the Muslim studies interests in a wider frame of the definition of Muslim culture. So, for not forgetting anything and be able to be on the time for today, I might present for like 30 to 40 minutes. For that reason, I might read from my notes to be able to be on charge. Please stop me for any questions anytime. If you have any comments, any questions, I'm happy for that. I just want to mention that in this program this year, I'm privileged to have the opportunity in teaching, while also being a part of having the chance to have a solo show that's going to happen in March at the Union Student Center. And also, which is very important for me, that I'm also teaching a class in each of the 2 semesters. This semester, I'm teaching a class that's called The Mirror, The Copy, Contemporary Arab Art, and Displacement. As going back to my educational background, as what Muhammad mentioned, I have 2 grads that I did in the last 2 years after moving from Palestine to the US to study in these 2 institutions. They are different, Chicago, New York, which was like, wow for me, doing these 2 programs. One of the 2 programs is a law residency program, where I'm going to New York only for 3 summers. So I wasn't able to go back to Palestine this summers because I'm doing another program. So I was doing an MFA at Bard College in New York State, and also at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, doing a master's in art education. So these conversations of like having this split between art education and MFA program was very important for me, and also Chicago, New York, and being related to that or that, and seeing Chicago through New York or New York through Chicago was very important for me to see that, and also the difference between the two institutions themselves. I will go also a little bit back. I have also two BFA just happened from also two different art colleges in Palestine back home. In Nablus, I did graphic design BFA in one of the oldest fine art colleges in Najaf University, and also later on, because of not having the opportunity to study or to have a master's in graphic design, I gave up and I decided to do another BA in Ramallah in visual contemporary art at the International Academy of Palestine. And that was also very different, like studying in that institution or having a very contemporary art perspective in a very small institution in Ramallah. That was really, I consider that was my first master's for myself. So I work, as Mohammed mentioned, with various mixed mediums in my practice, in art, in contemporary art. So these experiences of coming from different institutions didn't only allow me to think of thinking through disciplinaries, but also it helped me to see from my interest in art education the different kind of institutions that like thinking through like art education in that perspective or in another school from that perspective, or that like it really was very important for me to see through that also for myself as an educator in art. In my work, usually I start from research. I start from not only library surrounding kind of research, but also my self-research, and thinking of what I'm doing usually in each site. What is my identity is doing, and thinking through myself, my identity as a site itself, and thinking through that as a starting from my subject position in each site. So that's usually really like very clear for myself in my work, how I think and how I start from sometimes the research, but also my daily life observation around me. All of that is very important for me as to think of my presence, but also sometimes I'm interested in the reality and the fiction to think through my presence, which is important for me to think of deconstructing national geopolitical power dynamics, which is very related to what I'm interested in the next class that I'm teaching, which is going to be on geopolitics and collaboration, and just a very brief about the class next semester, which is going to be focused on collaboration in design and studio art, but through thinking of specific kind of barriers for that class. Of the case of MSU students in my class, going to be collaborating with artists from Palestine. And I feel like barriers is a main key term of that class, and thinking through not only how they're going to have a kind of dialogue because of the politics or stereotypes from each side, but also language barrier, location, and also the time zone of the 7 hours difference. How we're going to have a dialogue and collaborate and work together through all of these barriers. So I'm interested in all of these barriers as a starting point for the class to think together collectively, me and the students, in both sides. Okay. I'm going to start with the first work, So, as my work is also related to how I think, and which is go back to in 2015, and this work was going back to 1948. 1948, that we start talking officially about the beginning of the establishment of the occupation, the establishment of the State of Israel, or the birth of the State of Israel. So I was interested in how we thought since that moment. As many of you might already know, it's as I mentioned, the starting of the occupation of Israel. I was interested in these collective archival images as how we grow up with this image of the iconic traumatic images from the year of 1948. The collective walking of people being exiled, being moving, being still hoping to go back, as thinking of the symbols of the key. And so I was interested in that year and the heaviness of hundreds of thousands of people being exiled from Palestine to the West Bank, from 1948 to the West Bank, and also going to the surrounding countries or even further from that. So these images were very important for me to, I was tired of being one of my generation, thinking of the tiring feeling of the base of this iconic image, and so for me it's as I mentioned before, I was very interested in this parade, or what I called it as the parade of visibility, the parade of invisibility, as thinking of these collective walking of people being silent and moving. So through this work, and later on, I was also interested in the new metaphor of my generation using these symbols. And when sometimes it becomes, I don't like the term cliche, but I sometimes feel like what it means for our generation to reproduce this image and thinking of the heaviness of that. So as I mentioned, there is a kind of trauma that's happening from that generation, but for us, how we think of the new phase of trauma, when I would find, for example, it's very interesting for me, like a magazine or a logo for this award that's called Sanaoud for scientific research. So we were returned as a prize so it's not related to the political aspect of the meaning itself, but it's like a new phase of like how the trauma is embodying the new generation. Or you would find like the return channel. So again, so these are logos, or with this one, the first winner in the artistic competition, Sanaoud, and his name. So that was the starting point for me, not only the images, but how we embody that as in my generation and in a contemporary context. So all of that was important for me, thinking of trauma and thinking of going back to that moment. And I was interested in what is going to happen if I decided to question what happened in 1948, and I started with me collecting archives of anything can be important or even not from 1948. Anything from 1948 that can be not the image that I know. I wanted to find like if there is a cat born in that year. So from the same year and anything not related to Palestine, for me as a being curious myself. So it's I'm showing now images from a video installation that was produced in this like multi frames that's showing a kind of different parades of visibility from around the whole world. So I was interested in juxtaposing the image that we know about the parade of invisibility in Palestine for a Palestinian audience, and to have this work that for me is very important, that's made for a Palestinian audience who are familiar with what we share as an image. And I'm also interested in the one who doesn't know about that trauma to be in the same place and to have that contrast. So I'm gonna, okay, this is the important moments for me, like to manage how video can work. The duration of the video is 19 minutes, 48 seconds.
Where did you find the archival video?
From, for what?
For your installation?
From different resources, like the British Pathé Archive and all this. I was very interested, and it started from me finding about the Olympics in Britain from that year. As it was about, I was interested in the sportsmanship slogans that they had from the British itself, the Olympics from that year. I'm thinking of it's that they used to say, it's not about the loser or the winner, it's about sportsmanship. So as I mentioned before, I'm interested in the psychoanalytic process of going back to the moment of the accused trauma and try to heal it with showing the possibility of looking at something else to keep going. Through the same process of going to that archive, I wasn't really convinced enough to do only that work. Because of these materials, I was also interested in, I was collecting newspapers, but more specific from the day, 16 May 1948, the next morning after the establishment of Israel. And I was interested in looking at the front page of the newspapers and the headlines of how each country, specifically Western countries, gave how big is the article, that the manchette or the headline that is talking about what happened yesterday. I don't care about the side that they took, but I care about how big we took from their brain on that day. So, as these images, as my resources. So, the work ended up as these geometric shapes that's showing how big it is, and sometimes it might have nothing as an empty, the one here. So for me, the work reflects a reversed relationship between the content of the media creating a potential type of awareness towards the Palestinian situation on that day, and how it is employed as a counter to Orientalist visions of that region. I want to show this, it's just the location. It's very important for me because this was from an installation in Nablus, where I'm from, in the old city, in Khan al-Wakala, which is like a place that I choose to show that work there. And it was the only time I'm showing in Nablus, in my city, and it's important to me also to be closer to my family and to have this especially to my mom, to show this work, which was a very interesting moment for me. That my mom, as an educator, and I'm mentioning that because I love the moment how she took the role, even as being at some point while explaining the work for her, it's like, why you are like taking, like, where's the key? Where's the symbol of the key? Where is the image that I know? Like, what it means to not have those images and to try to show me anything else. Like that moment of that like, what does that mean? So it was a conversation between two generations that it was very interesting for me after showing the work and having my mom like in this picture here, and me after like the time of the presentation or exhibiting the work, noticing that my mom taking the role of the art guide or taking this didactic role of like, I found her like explaining the work for someone else. It's very important. This is showing how exactly we took from their brain. This is very important for us because it's so she was more interested in the newspaper and taking that role of like defending the role, and that was a very powerful moment for me. And seeing my mom I don't know why I'm sharing that. It's just yeah. Another work, which is related to the same archive of 1948, but this is a different site, and this is the first work that I came from Palestine and moving to the US 2-3 years ago. And it was a very important moment for me, like what I'm doing in this site. And this is like a documentation of performance, live performance, where I was interested in this specific musical score by John Cage, the American pioneer, avant-gardist John Cage. And this is specificity because of Black Mountain College and Bard College, where I was studying the same location, this utopian college that does not exist anymore, and being there, and himself being a faculty at some point in Bard College. So all of these situations were very important for me, and I was interested in this specific music, and this musical score that from 1948, or he presented it for the first time in 1948, that was called Dream. And through that time I wanted to play 1948 in the US and to document myself playing. I don't play piano, by the way. And I wanted to play it, and I don't know how to play it, but I was interested in implementing that score that I can't do, and to play it there. Through that time, because of the fact that it was the second institution that I'm coming to, and it was very interesting for me to find myself in this site and in several institutions that I'm ending up with like surrounded by Israeli classmates or Israeli, and that like encounter was very new for me. It's a very different, like the Israeli that I know usually as being in the West Bank, where I go through checkpoints, where they will ask to open the door of our house. So that was a very different conversation for me to find myself being closer to have this classmate, sound artist Orzo Palsky, and he is a sound and he is hardly playing piano or can read it. So I found myself that I'm asking that person. It's very important to mention that Or is a pro-Palestinian who escaped the military from Israel to move here like 11 years ago. So I found myself that I'm asking Or at some point to teach me to play the piece, just to document myself, and that was a moment of like, I'm asking Or with that identity to teach me to play this piece for my reason. So, and the essence of like American-Israeli relationship, that's Israeli-Palestinian dialogue to be staged in this theatrical scene. And I was interested in the American audience surrounded by me. I was like very interested in like, oh, I'm showing in front of an American audience, and I wanted to stage this, of that gaze, looking at this scene of an Israeli-Palestinian sitting together and confusing the piece sitting and staging the scene. That was, for me, is like a theatrical moment. So I want to play this, like some part from So as you notice, it's like a moment of like or reading from the score itself, and me mimicking or looking at his hands to repeat that on my side. Another work. Also, this work for me is a documentation or to make an evidence of an act of an act that I used to do in the morning. I grew up in the United Arab Emirates, and we came back to Palestine in early 2000, a few months before the second Intifada. But while growing up in Emirates and living there and growing up as a wafid, the term of being an Arab living there, this work is coming from a documentation of an act that I used to do while singing the Emirati national anthem in the morning, of replacing, without anyone noticing around me, vision itself. So I'm also interested in how this work is also like the collective singing and the lip sync in itself, and how it's not visual, it's more like embodied. I'm just saying Palestine, but no one hearing that. And this work was a documentation of repeat doing the same act itself, and also in another phase as hearing the collective singing, that same Emirates, and observing the lip sync itself. A very recent work that is already now on display in Chicago, that's called Medina, Shurafa al-Ain, that is related to the Shriners. The Shriners in the U.S. and this collective, what do we call them? This group, which is a part of it's an elite group of the Freemasonry group itself. So the Shriners has temples in different places, and in this one, in particular in Chicago, it's called the Medina Temple, while it's the Medina Shriner. While, for example, like Detroit is the Muslim, M-O-S-L-E-M Shriner. You would find Mecca is in New York. There's weird names as Habibi Shriner somewhere. So I was interested in how they mapped countries, names, cities, sometimes rivers, sometimes it doesn't make any sense of cultural Arab thing to be appropriated or to be remapping that on the map of the United States and even other locations of bringing that. So for me it's like a very clear example of Orientalism. So I was interested in that specific building, the Medina Temple in the downtown of Chicago. As looking at it, that was really confusing that it looks like a mosque, but it's not a mosque. And it was used as a theater because the Shriners are very famous as being also helping children, but also being considered themselves as clowns and having like circus and theaters. So this was used as it's built to be a theater, but now it's Bloomingdale's furniture place. So I was interested in looking at this mosque and reading that it looks like it says La ilaha illallah, this text on the gate, but it's not saying La ilaha illallah, it's misspelling the no God but God, a famous sentence in Islam. And it's, by the way, it's a collaboration between me and Amanda Assali in Chicago. So we decided, because of this interest, we decided to recreate and deconstruct this pattern of the gate, but with the same like quantity, but to recreate that, to recreate the motifs, the units, in the same quantity, but to not repeat it, to not see it visually, but to have it as a quantity. So I was very interested, we were very interested in recreating the quantity of that gate and the curtains of the theater, for sure. The curtains, so it was a part of a show that is already still called Living Architecture at 6018 North, as a part of a larger scale exhibition that highlight the influence and impact of immigrant artists on Chicago. I still feel like this subject matter is of the Shrine is something that I'm still working on and going for my exhibition in March. And it's interesting for me, I'm finding myself being interested in the parade as a form again, and while looking at their parades and like that specific aesthetics that they use, and I'm becoming again interested in the parade as a form to create. So I'm gonna skip and be another work that was called Oslo Zones 2 years ago. No, it's 4 years ago, while doing a residency or an exchange in Oslo, Norway. So for me, this work is projecting Palestine onto Oslo while being in Oslo. And this work is coming from the story that I was buying my transportation card in Norway to go, in Oslo to go places. So you buy this specific card. And there was this moment that the seller was asking me to which zones in Oslo you want to buy the card. So while translating, because of my weak English, translating everything to Arabic, it was a very surreal question that I'm translating in my brain to Arabic. To which zones of Oslo I want to buy the car. That was very specific in the context of Palestine. So by looking at the map, that's the map that you buy for, like, that's the center or the downtown, the red #1 of Oslo, or you buy the bigger access to go to bigger zones of Oslo. So as thinking of the zones of Oslo in the map of Palestine, it has also a very specific relationship thinking of the agreement of Oslo or the peace process. So the work was like this image is showing when you search on Oslo Zones on Google Map, that's showing you the both maps of Palestine or the West Bank, Gaza, and also the maps of Oslo itself. And that's very different because we are looking at Oslo as a place, but Oslo as a time from 1993. So the work is coming from there, coming from that confusion and how I was seeing that as most maybe familiar with the iconic image of Yasser Arafat and Rabin having the peace after like the secret negotiations in Oslo that started even before 1993. So for me, the term Oslo then used as a point of time, not only because of what it created in the Palestinian geography, but also what has been added to the history of the Palestinian displacement, as it was a moment of hope for many Palestinians. Since 1993, the agreement determined the smallest details of Palestinians' life, and it restricted their freedom of movement and divided the land they were given into three zones, Zone A, Zone B, Zone C. Zone A is authorized by Palestinian PLO, or Zone B is by both, and C is where the settlements will be playing in the West Bank. So I decided to go for this project to go to all zones of Oslo. And I bought a card, and I was enjoying the landscape with going, and I was interested in my work as documenting and having an evidence of going to all zones of Oslo. So Google Map helped me to document that, and the work was showing me, and Google Map is as a screenshots of being in all zones of Oslo. The work was also documented in video, and I also reproduced or faked one of the transportation guides, and including the text of Oslo Agreement in one of the guides that usually they will be showing like the time of when each kind of transportation will, the times itself, but inserting the text of Oslo in one of these guides that has the same graphic design or the same branding of that router, the company, and I named it, and I also include it, or I inserted it in the public places. So it was like as a part of their original guides. So I framed my pass card, and I also dubbed or translated the commercial videos. That was like how to buy the card. You buy it to go all zones of Oslo, and you buy it. It's very easy to go to there, and I was very interested in hearing that in Arabic, and you like thinking of Oslo zones being used in this term. So, and it was important for me to even include it in public in Oslo, surrounded by the other guides. There was text, different kind of text, sometimes my own text as in the installation. This text that was shown from outside that says, this made possible by support from Apple, Google, and Router. I also included some screenshots of like trying to go from Tulkarem to Beit Lahem on the website of, but it was invalid stop and invalid stop. This image is showing the two layers of the two maps, the two Oslos, on top of each other. There was a historical quotation that I found from the history of the Norwegian Transportation Company on a site that says, I will go back. It says, in 1993, the western lines were upgraded and connected to the metro, allowing metro trains to run through the city center of Oslo. I'm showing here a photography, documentary photography work that I did. And it was related to, it was a workshop on environment in your place. So for me, it was a moment of like finding what is an environment, an iconic symbol that I want to document. And for me, it was maybe just important for me to think of the wall as being an environmental element that is deconstructing or like shaping the environment itself and how it looks and how. So I was interested in not only documenting the wall itself, but also documenting these specific houses that will be cut by the wall or living around the wall and how that affected who's inside, who's outside. This was the only image that I took from being inside Jerusalem, not on the wall, from outside. And the only time that I was able to illegally enter Jerusalem in the first like 14 years, as the work is from 2014. It was interesting for me to see how it's not only shaping houses, the wall, how it's shaping families, and how they are using the wall, but also like this was a farm that is using a corner of the wall as a farm from the Palestinian side. So it's really an environmental used element. And it was also interesting for me to find these moments of the wall being used by this domestic, like using this material instead of the material of the wall, because it's very close by the homes. So in a very close spaces to houses, they would be using this material to make it more human. So that was very important for me, like to think of this materiality of the wall itself while saying this French word, jouer de vivre, play, fun. Another word, and I'll have it as a last word, which is also coming from the interest that I have related to the national anthems. This work was a part of, it's going back to my interest in the collective singing together a national anthem. But this is more specific in the case of Jordan itself as being this safe zone surrounded by other countries. So I was interested in that kind of community that I would find in Amman, in Jordan, and it was a part of a workshop that we were having with Emir Jasser, the Palestinian artist, and about local, mahalli, and the meaning of what is mahalli, what is local, what is not. So I'm going to show
عاش المليك عاش المليك سامي أحرزنا المنى يوم أحييت لنا نهضة تحفيزنا تتسامى فوق هذه الشهور يا مليك العرب لك من خير نبي شرف في النسب حدثت عنه طول الكتب
بحريننا وطن الأمان وطن الكرام يحمي حماها أميرنا الهمام عاشت على هدي الرسالة والعدالة والسلام عاشت دولة البحرين بحرين
وطن مدى على الأفق جناحه وارتدى.
This person is singing the Iraqi anthem, or the anthem that was in Iraq before Saddam. What's the third? Yeah, and he's singing this anthem that they changed the anthem later to Maltani. Maltani is the previous Palestinian national anthem. So it was a very interesting moment to see like how the same lyrics will be used for different nations in different times. I'm going to end up with this work, which is also a recent work from last year that was related to my present being here and finding a new Palestine in Ohio, or finding a town that's called New Palestine. There's one in Indiana. So I was interested in, this was an intervention of me writing أنا بحب فلسطين الجديدة في Ohio, and as a public intervention in different locations. So I was interested in thinking of doing this work in 2018 in various places, and I'm still interested in finding a new Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Qais. Well, we have about 10 minutes before they kick us out, 15 minutes actually, before they kick us out. So why don't we open the floor for questions? Not all at once. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I found it fascinating. And I'm just, actually this last thing, and Palestine, I don't know if you're aware, but Anthem wrote an article about, he did the same thing. He did a Google search, this is from 10 years ago maybe, and he typed in Palestine, and there are Palestines all over, you know, I guess there are 15.
There's Palestine in Texas.
Texas too.
Because I like New Palestine.
Right, but I think he was just doing Palestine, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Anton Shams.
Yeah, do you know him at all? So he's in Ann Arbor, and it would be worth, I think, he's a novelist. Do you know him as a writer? Do you know the name at all? So he was really the first Israeli-Palestinian writer to write in Hebrew. He wrote a novel in Hebrew, a very florid, a very eloquent Hebrew, and he's been living in Ann Arbor. He came after he's been there for about 20-something years. He left Palestine, left Israel, and came to Ann Arbor, and he's teaching at the university. And again, he did this paper on Palestine and the cartography of Palestine.
I have two questions. One of them is a little abstract, but I can start with it anyway. So I was really struck in the first work between the similarity of the images of walking in Palestine to the ones that I'm familiar with from partition in South Asia, and what is common. South Asia, so India and Pakistan. You still, I mean, in India and Pakistan, I'm sure that you're aware of it for the whole room. There was a huge population, a transfer of around 10 million people, around 500,000 people were killed in the moments of transfer, and the transfer was done in a combination of trains and walking, and both modes of transportation were equally lethal. Indian people would be killed whether they were walking or on trains. But here, that's neither here nor there. It is important, but what I'm really interested in is the diagonal and the way that a lot of your archival work where you're looking elsewhere retains the same way of making space within the photograph. So if you go back to that video, there's an obsessive modernist obsession with diagonals as a way of making space. And I was wondering if that was something that you did on purpose, or whether it's just, if you took a photograph in 1948, it would have that strong diagonal. But you see, so even the bodies of women that go through are very often, aligned in the same way. And I was interested in whether that was attractive to you.
What do you mean by aligned in the same way?
Meaning that they're making these oblique angles diagonally across the picture. So you have, this, and they're going from there to there. And that's the same as the historical photographs that you were looking at, the one on the bottom left.
Yeah.
And I think all of them in the previous slide. Right. Even the camp is shown that way. And that is it's a modernist trope of photography. But
or maybe Russian constructed.
What? No, right, exactly. And so I'm wondering whether you were interested in those visual. So meaning you're looking elsewhere, but the look is similar. And I told you it was abstract, the question. It's a non-question. It's more sort of thinking about what is the space of this kind of form in that even you made it in a diagonal, you made it in a corner, right? So there's a kind of interesting proximity there, sameness to that. I don't know what else to say about it, but did you do it on purpose, or am I?
For me, it's coming from, I guess, it's similar time.
Yeah.
Similar photographers, similar video makers. So I wonder if that's something that I think of, like a specific level of how we photograph from that time. I didn't video these because I wasn't in 48. So I was like dealing with a specific. I wasn't cropping to have a specific composition or like for myself. But it's interesting for me that you had this great observation, like to think of that, because I'm very interested in the similarities, obviously, in the context of the parades or the collective walking. But that's a very formal, interesting observation too. Yeah.
Next question.
So that was really fantastic, Qais. I wanted to get up and cheer when you had the flyer for the Oslo maps that you put out there. I just think that's an amazing intervention and really, really quite brilliant. And I mean, all the work is extremely original, and that was making me think a little bit about the conventionality of a lot of Palestinian national art, your relationship to the paintings, that have the olive trees and the women, and the idea of Palestine with the map, and it sort of goes a bit with sort of your sense of the cliche around the parade, the documentary photographs. But within the tradition of contemporary Palestinian art, you still have that as a very powerful, with the themes of Samud and all of this kind of thing. Now the wall appearing quite a bit, but still with sort of, you see it even a little bit in Banksy artwork as well, where he's sort of like this kind of resistance art. But you're doing that, but you're doing it in a really different way. So what's your relationship to, I wouldn't call it traditional Palestinian art, which might be more attached to textiles and ceramics and those other art forms that are truly part of the national tradition as well. But you're working more within a kind of Western, as are some of those painters. And so, can you talk a little bit about your relationship to Palestinians?
I'm very interested in thinking of like how there is this Palestinian conversation, especially in the contemporary art scene. And in my class, the name of the class that I'm teaching right now, the copy, the mirror, contemporary Arab art and displacement. And we tackled so many moments of how Sleiman Mansour did
exactly
Jabal al-Muhammad, the carrier of the dome of how to translate Jabal al-Muhammad, the famous iconic painting of carrying the Jerusalem on his back, and how contemporary Arab artists, Palestinian artists, have been reproduced the image and how they're reproducing the image, which is very fascinating for me to think of that conversation that's happening through generations of Palestinians from different time. And it's like for the same image, that it's still related to us. That image, but I see it different than Sleiman Mansour or that artist that appropriated. I see it in different ways. So that's very, very important for me. It is the same image. It's still building on top of each other in a different context. In the context of Oslo, that is different than Sleiman Mansour when he did it. So that's how I think of it. Which is confusing the originality of art, which is very important for me.
We'll take one more question. Oh, yes.
Considering your work with Oslo and the Palestinian Oslo and the Norwegian Oslo and New Palestine and most of your other work, you use a lot of use Palestine as a reference and how Palestinian context and experience affecting when you look at stuff that somehow reference Palestine. So, in a sense, in Oslo, you have this Palestinian reference. So, with the socio-political situation, firstly, you can say that Palestine does not exist. Or for many people, it's mostly a reference. Because, as you said, you did not even get to see Palestine for 14 years when you were there. Or most of it. Yeah. Most of it. So, different Palestinians or different people that you have met along the way have different. I can't remember the word, but the context of reference is different across people, and if people of different cultures see the values in the conflicting references. Sorry.
I think it's also related to think of like the differences through generations, but for me it's, as I understand your questions, how artists, they are different, seeing the context of referencing Palestine. Like for me it's very important to have the infinite of how the occupation is affecting each identity of a Palestinian. As me raising in the United Arab Emirates, not as a refugee, just for better opportunities for my dad, that is also, I feel like, it is related to the occupation in an indirect way. It's not that common to talk about the Palestinians community in the Arab Gulf countries because it has a different context than being a refugee, but it has its own specific story, and that specific like living in a community as Palestinians in Arab Gulf countries. And for me, those specificities of being abroad, being outside, living Palestine while being in Emirates or being in Oslo or being anywhere is very related to my exact vision of how I grow up outside, going every summer. I wasn't exiled from my family, but there is a specific kind of how I see Palestine growing up, singing before learning anything, growing up singing these specific songs and thinking of what is happening there and how you. So it's like seeing Palestine everywhere. I hate the idea of thinking Palestine as an idea. It is there. It is having its it will never be an idea. It is a place. And that's very important for me. And that's something that I'm struggling and sometimes challenge myself to not think of Palestine as the idea itself.
Well, two things. First of all, please join me in thanking Qais Assali for I believe you'll be giving some presentations for the art history design department, a couple of the next semester.
Put him to work, yeah.
Yeah, so look for Qais Assali, AAHD. Also, I want to tell you that our next event is a week from today. We're going to show a film about the Syrian crisis. The film is called Little Gandhi, and it's about the Syrian crisis. It's going to be next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, right here in B119 Wells Hall. And the filmmaker is actually going to be here. This was a film that there was some talk that this could be nominated for Best Foreign Film, but there was a technicality or something, and so it wasn't. Anyway, it should be a very interesting film, and the filmmaker will actually be here to answer questions. And again, that's next Wednesday at 7, and there are flyers right there. Again, the movie's called Little Gandhi. It's about the Syrian crisis. Okay, have a good one. Thank you. Thank you very much.